If you told me that McLaren would go from what they started to now, from fighting for P17 to fighting for P2 and potentially wins, I would not believe you that the car would change this much and they would gain almost a whole second and a half from their upgrades. It is Thursday, and you know on race weekends that I usually have an upgrade video for Thursday. Well, let's keep it going with talking about McLaren's miracle run that they've really had over this 2023 season and making them, in my opinion, the biggest challengers for Red Bull in 2024, because I want to strictly go over their 27 upgrades that they've really brought throughout the season. Not every single one of them, but the biggest ones, and as to how the side pod changed, the floor, rear wing, and front wing have all changed the philosophy of this car and have made it perform a lot better. Actually, in the top 4 teams when it comes to performance upgrades, and their upgrade run isn't even done yet, but this is the majority of it for the 2023 season going into 24. So let's talk about it. So firstly, let's discuss how their side pod works. Obviously, their philosophy is pretty close to the Aston Martin car, but it pulls from Red Bull as well, especially with the floor. Looking at this picture, you can tell how the airflow goes from the actual front wing and how it's supposed to be going, feeding into that undercut of the side pod. Obviously, some air will be going above the side pod inlet, going into that water slide. That is something we will speak about. But from this picture, you see its actual undercut and how it flows into the back of the car, or really into the rear part of the floor, feeding into the beam wing, making it a long stream. Obviously, as I said, pretty close to the Aston Martin car, but done better, clearly, considering what they have been doing. Here's a better picture of that water slide and what the car used to be before Austria, because that was where the car got its biggest side pod upgrade. Very similar to the Aston Martin, but if you're to look at the old McLaren car, the one that before Austria upgrades, it was almost identical to the Red Bull side pod. The inlet was a little different, but the actual side of it had that little double divot. It had the exact same philosophy going into the back of their car. The floor wasn't the same, and that side pod concept just wasn't working for them. Clearly, it didn't have them that fast. They had that throughout the 2022 season, and they continued it in 23, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So now they've picked up on a better philosophy. And what this philosophy does is it feeds the air to the back of the car, trying to stall the beam wing. The beam wing is a key contributor to our nowadays floor cars. Clearly, Red Bull's triple DRS system and what they've been able to do with the car through the beam wing and diffuser has been an inspiration to teams on the grid. McLaren picking up on that and performing very well off of that. Yet again, making their upgrades count when they matter. That is where McLaren has excelled at this year, and this is only one of very much upgrades that have worked. As I said, water slide feeds into the back, but really concentrating that air to go onto the beam wing to give you that faster straight line speed, and also rear downforce towards the rear of the car, because you're also suctioning the air better, giving it a more tighter airflow. Here's another picture of the floor, just a little change that they've made. This is really just cut for more aero efficiency, but it also shows you the little Venturi tunnel change that they've actually had. Before, they had it a little bit picked up over the floor, which was an interesting part. I get why they did it. They did it to actually dictate the airflow going more towards the inlet part of the side pod. Took that away, raised the actual floor height a little bit, and that's what they did. Here's the beam wing that I've been talking about. Another change that they went for that obviously is inspired off of Red Bull was going with the one beam wing on the lower part, not having the usual 2 beam wings topped on top of each other. One obviously being like a V, and the other one using it as its real, I guess, the triple DRS. It's supposed to be there for coming out of the diffuser, using the beam wing, and promoting the airflow to go in a fashion that you want it to go into, giving the car more aero efficiency in both downforce but also straight line speed. It's almost like a way of stalling the car. That is the whole entire purpose of the beam wing, and going with the setup that many teams on the grid have copied because Red Bull was just so good and excelled at it. Here's a picture of the rear wing. A rear wing was something that they were lacking on for most of the year. They even said that they were focused on the actual car's aero efficiency for most of the season, but obviously they were still really slow in straight line. They upgraded their rear wing, but it's a lot of things that were implemented to give them a straight line. The rear wing is only one part of a very big aero package that came to the McLaren car that really helped them. Part of it is the side pod Also, the profound undercut under the side pod that has been now enhanced to the car, promoting the airflow, but also its floor philosophy and edge that I will talk about all going into one. But key things with this rear wing is they actually cut out the edge, going off of Mercedes and Aston Martin, taking off of that philosophy. Even Red Bull just adopted it recently, knowing that that gives you more aero efficiency and less drag, but also just a thinner, more lighter rear wing than it was before. Obviously, the shape of it is not too much different because the rear wing was still working, giving them that rear downforce they needed for the car to actually be super strong in very important sectors. Like we saw in Sector 1 in Japan, the car is a downforce monster. Currently, probably the best car when it comes to downforce in certain sectors. It's not as efficient as a whole like the Red Bull, but it's really not that far off considering they have the whole entire suspension set up like them. They know how to lower their car and keep that floor at a proper level to make them go even faster on the straights, but also in high speed, where Formula One cars excel. That is where a Formula One car comes alive, and that is where the McLaren also comes alive. Here is the floor edge, something new also implemented to the car. As you see from before, very simple. It's not really working in their case, but couple things to note here. More profound undercut, obviously, with the slide pod. If both the airs are colliding, that's also another way of giving a downforce through the side pod, but also through the floor edge on the undercut, suctioning that floor from the bottom, and adding these little clip-ons, which is a way of dictating the airflow from under the car and giving the underfloor a more streamlined action. Obviously, also with the floor edge, you see how it's also feeding up into the floor, bringing it back to that beam wing. That is why you have that little line back there going towards the beam wing and the back part of the floor. All in all, making a very aero-efficient car and something that McLaren has really excelled at. Whatever they were putting on paper over there in the wind tunnel, they started nailing it for the actual car in season. Since it's been in stealth mode, it's been also a beast. So props to them, the team that I think in 2024 can really bring the fight to Red Bull because they're continuously working upon their car. They say only 50% of it is done. Another part of the car that actually I didn't mention though was a big upgrade to them as well was the front wing. Talking about the front wing, it gave them a different type of outwash and they took inspiration off of other teams. McLaren have been great at taking inspiration off of other teams, but they have been also very, very good at excelling in it. They've been practically flawless in their upgrades in 23. Baku was a pretty significant one, messing around with the floor, seeing what is the optimal setup and ride height for them. They figured it out, come into Austria, they're beasts, and they're continuing it. I hope their success continues for this McLaren team. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you guys think these guys can actually challenge Red Bull in 24? And what do you think of this upgrade video? Let me know your thoughts down below. Please leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It would mean the world, and peace.